So yes, all of that is true. I'm a native Texan, proud to be, but I've lived in Chicagoland for the last 30 plus years, and I've been doing youth ministry for the last 25. And as you said, I don't have children anymore. I have all adults. My youngest is 19, so they have all successfully made it through high school. I'm not going to tell you anything else. I'm not going to brag on any other successes because the cement is wet with all of them, 19 to 25. Like they present well. A lot of times people will say, oh, your kids are just great. And I say, they present well. Yes, they are polite to outsiders. They're not always great with us, but that's sort of the deal. But the sort of genesis behind this message started when I was sharing with a friend about just some things that I thought were pretty obvious to how I've seen students. So I'm speaking as a parent, but also as a youth pastor who has seen students, high school students, for the last 25 years, and just say things I thought, well, X, Y, Z, and he said, oh yeah, I don't know that, and people don't know that. You need to do a talk or something to tell people these things because they just don't know it. And I'm like, okay, interesting. So that's kind of where this came from, and we're going to get into the material soon, but as the commercials say, results may vary. So you could get everyone 9 of these and just go yeah, I'm crushing it, Syler. I got all these going. And you may come back to me later and be like, it didn't work. I don't know what you're talking about, but these 9 didn't work with my kids. So these are all sort of things that it all depends on the kid and the environment and everything here. But so the basics is that these are things that we need to know as our kids are entering high school. And if you're in youth ministry and you don't, these are hopefully things that you might be able to take back and help your parents understand as they are navigating parenting middle schoolers, high schoolers as well. So we're going to start here. I'm going to go through the 9, and at the end of each one, I've got a little action step as well. So the first one is that your kids belong to God. You are their stewards. So this is super obvious, but it does need to be said. Psalm 127:3, children are a blessing and a gift from the Lord. But they're not just any kind of gift, right? They're autonomous beings. They're not toys. They're not puppets. They're not robots that we have to program. You've been given an opportunity to shape them, but not to control or own them. So when they're younger, it is easy. You control them. You can really control them. And there's this theme that you're going to be hearing as I talk about. You need to be gradually releasing control as they get older. We have a responsibility to discipline our kids and to disciple them in the way of Jesus, but God has a call on their life independent of your own hopes and dreams, and their journey will not be your journey or necessarily the journey that you hope for them. I believed in the early years wrongly that producing Christian children was a simple thing. It was you just do these 4 things or 5 things and boom, boom, boom. And at the end of it, they come out as good Christian adults. And, they won't have to go to therapy. They won't, all that stuff. I'm going to do the right things. And it's just not true. The easiest thing you can do now is sort of let go of that idea that if you do it right, they're going to turn out okay. They may turn out okay, or they may not. But you need to let go of this lie that if you do it right, they're going to be okay. I was raised, so my background, I was raised, parents divorced, dad lived in a different city. I was raised mostly by my mom. We went to church, but church was kind of the thing that was we'll go to church. She did not have a desire for me to have a relationship with God. But I believe that I learned the gospel from my mom because of her unconditional love. And she really did. She had unconditional love for me. And she really, I learned what it meant to be loved by someone and have that not be based on anything that I did. I really think my mom taught me the gospel in that way. And it kind of worked out for me because I wasn't a difficult kid, but I definitely had my own way of wanting to do things, and my mom kind of recognized that, especially as I got older, and just kind of got out of the way. I know for me that if I had been raised in a home where there were a lot of rules and expectations and that my outward behavior was important, that I had to sort of, just behavioral modification was important for me, I think I would have really resisted that. And that informed my parenting. I can tell you that. It informed my parenting, knowing that would I want expectations on my children that were not placed on me, especially kind of knowing that a lot of my kids were similar to me. So as they get older, as they move into high school, and as you anticipate the day when they head off to college, again, that process of starting the process of letting go, and we're going to get to more of that in a minute, is important, and remembering that, oh yes, these are my children for a time. I steward them during the time that they're in my house, but they're God's. God has a plan for them. God has a journey for them, and I can let myself off the hook. The reality is, having done youth ministry for 25 years, I know a lot of families who did everything right, like everything right that I could tell, and their kids aren't following Jesus as adults. Conversely, I see plenty of parents who just said, boy, they could not have done a worse job, from my perspective, of being a good Christian parent, and the kids are following Jesus as adults. So it just isn't, there just isn't this perfect formula to do in order to make your kids turn out the way that you think they should be. And probably the worst extension of this as Christian parents is when we take pride in how good our kids are. I remember an example of a friend of mine in ministry who told me that she was the only one in kind of the community that didn't know that her son was living a double life. She was the only one. She was just like, oh, my son, he's such a good boy. He goes to church. He goes to youth group. Well, everybody else knew that he was out. When he said to mom he was going here, he was actually going there, and he had a double life. But she didn't know it. And when she found out, it crushed her, especially because she thought, look at all the good I've done. Look at what a great parent I am, and look at my model children. So because she identified so strongly as the parent of the good Christian kid, it was just crushing when she found out that wasn't actually happening. So raise your kids to love God, to enjoy being at church, and to understand that they're a gift, but they're not yours to keep. They're a gift to eventually, you're going to be giving that gift away. So the action associated with this is just to, I think it's to let yourself off the hook, to let yourself, another way, trust God in this. It's not up to you. Let that be a weight lifted off your shoulders to say, okay, it's not up to me. I do the best I can, but it's not up to me to make sure that my kids turn out okay. That's number one. Number two is that your kids' relationship with God has to eventually be something they want. So we hope that our kids will want to have a relationship with God, but we have to eventually let that happen. This verse here I have, 1 Corinthians 3, 6 and 7. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So then neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. You can't make your kids love the Lord. I heard John Piper say one time, you can lead a horse to water. You can even put their heads down in the water and make them drink it, but you can't make them say, I love this water. That's my best John Piper. And that's true. You can't make your kids have a desire to love God. And it's crushing for some parents who have done everything right, and their kids still don't have that desire to love God. But you can certainly put them in situations where they can hopefully develop their own faith. You can make sure that the ground that the seeds are being planted in is fertile, that it gets water, but ultimately it's God that does that. So the most powerful thing that you can do if you want your kids to have a relationship with God is to model that, to live your faith authentically in front of them, not showy for them, because they will read a hypocrite, right? They will see if you are not authentic in your faith. But to authentically live your own faith out, they see you behaving honestly. They see you behaving with integrity. They see you being generous with others. They let them catch you having integrity in the right moments, right? That your faith is authentic and genuine and making a difference. That's the most compelling apologetic that you can have in your life, is to authentically live your own faith out. So, and I think that's the best way to have them have a hunger for what you have. So the action item on this one is to live your own faith out with honesty and transparency. That's number 2. Number 3 is that open communication is the goal. So this verse here, of course, a famous one: impress the commandments on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. When your kids are younger, when you're talking to them, you're going to do a lot more talking when they're younger, as you are seeking to impress upon them a biblical worldview. As the scriptures say right here, that when you go and as they're asking questions, you're doing a lot of talking. You're helping them put together their worldview, and you're pointing them to scripture, and you're hoping that as you talk to them, they are putting together that biblical worldview as well. As they get older, they want to hear you talk less. They just do. Like, they want to do more talking, and they have to know that you are listening. So the shift that has to happen, especially as they enter high school, is that you want to be much more of a listener than a talker. You want to create curiosity in them, and you want them to know that you're a safe place to come to, where they will be listened to and not just talked to. At some point, especially, as a dad and my children I didn't even know I was doing it, but they picked up on a thing that I would say a lot, which is, well, the key is, and so they would just start to be like, oh yeah, Dad, the key is, and I'm like, that's really mean, you guys, okay? Because it is the key. The key is important, okay? But I realized you can't say that anymore, because now you're a meme. Like, I became a meme in my own family. Like, well, the key is, the key, I realized that works when they're in 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, maybe. But as they get into high school, they're just going to stop listening because, oh, yeah, the key is, Dad. Oh, what's the key, Dad? But you want them to know that when they have something to say, you're ready to listen. And every kid is different, right? So our older 2 talk, and we really appreciated that. And sometimes they told us too much. Sometimes it's like, you don't have to tell us that. That's fine. As you get older, I don't need to know all the details. Our younger 2 were a lot quieter. But like one of them, our number 3 kid, who's boy, girl, boy, girl, or only boy, he would be very, very quiet. And then occasionally, like right as we're going to bed, he walks in. He's like, so today? And we're like, now? What are you doing? We're so tired, But that's when he wanted to open up and share the story. And so we're just like, okay, yeah, listen, we want to hear. As they get older too, especially as they start to move into college and even after college, you have to be willing to listen and stop giving advice. This is really good. My wife's really good at this. I'm really bad at this. As I said, I want to talk about the key. I want to explain exactly what went wrong and how they can do better. And I think of a situation in particular where one of our kids was struggling with a life decision, and she was talking to us on the phone, and she was sort of opening up about different decisions she could be making. And to me, it's just so obvious, and she needs to do this and not this. And everything in me wants to just start saying, well, what you need, come on. And my wife would physically grab me and just like hold me. And she is so good. She's like, well, what do you think about that? Okay, well, what do you think you're going to do about that? When we ask them questions and when we say, what are you going to do? What that suggests to them is that they know the answer. It suggests to them that we trust them and that God has given them what they need to make the right decisions. And that eventually, it's wonderful that they come to us for advice and that they want to hear what we have to say. And what I've learned from my wife, and it's still very hard for me, but I've learned from my wife is how to listen and ask more questions of them and help them come to the answer rather than just giving them the answer. But open communication is always the goal, letting them know. The last thing I'll say on this is sometimes even when they say things that will freak you out and that will be like, well, what does that mean? And like if they're coming and saying things like, well, yeah, I was at this party and there was this going on, again, calm. Like that, because if you start to, well, what's going on? Why were you at that party? What's the message that they're getting? Okay, well, I'm not telling them again. It's not that they're going to necessarily do things differently about their choices, but they're going to say, well, I'm definitely, okay, they freaked out. Last time I told them what was going on, they freaked out. So if you have to be committed to not freaking out and saying, oh, okay, well, what do you think about that? Well, and how did that make you feel? And what do you think you might do the next time? Questions, listening, knowing that you are going to be a safe place for them to say whatever they want to say, and you're not going to freak out. So the action on this one is a shift as they enter high school and as they get older from mostly talking to mostly listening. That's number 3. Number 4 is this. Each family has to decide the extent to which your children engage with the world. So every family's different. And even things like some of your kids, some of you are going to send your kids to public school, some to private school, some homeschool, whatever that is. And depending on where you live and what that looks like, you have to make those decisions. For us, our kids ended up going to public schools, and I can tell you, the public school that our kid went to, when I was ministering to students at that school when they were little, and if you had told me when I had them young and I was sort of seeing and hearing about the things that was happening at that public high school, if you had told me that, yes, eventually your children, you're going to send them to that public school, when I was younger, I would have thought, what sort of monster did I become that I would send my precious children into that den of sin and debauchery that is the public high school, right? As I got older, I began to realize that, okay, no, this is there are, again, for us, every family's different, but for us, I realized that, no, you can. And I began to see other parents who were sending their kids, and their kids were learning how to navigate that world and coming out of it on the other end, and they were not completely messed up, and they had a strong faith as they left. So whatever you decide, you have to decide, related to schools, but the schools are going to do their thing, and you have to do your thing as parents. No matter where they go, you have to parent even as the schools are teaching. And in terms of interaction with the world, what I mean by that is things like the content, movies, television, all that stuff, and we'll get into cell phones a little bit more later, but for us, there were certain things where we said, yeah, you can watch this, and you're not going to watch that. Most of you, if you're parents, you know about Common Sense Media. Praise Jesus for Common Sense Media, because whatever the movie is, the TV show, you can go to Common Sense Media and look it up and say, it's rated R for this, it's rated PG-13 for that, and they'll even say, this word is used and that word, and not just language, but also, sort of messages that are being spelled out. So we were always hitting up the Common Sense Media to decide, is that okay or is it not okay? And the thing about about the content and protecting, there is a time for protecting our kids. I 100%, but it's kind of like Santa. In the sense of if you're doing Santa when your kids are 5, that's great. If you're still doing Santa when they're 15, that's a little weird, right? So if you're protecting your kids when they're 9, 10, 11, 12, even 13, yeah, that's great. But if you're still trying to protect them when they're 18 years old and about to head off to college, that's a little weird. Like, they're about to leave and you need to help them learn how to interact with that stuff and not just have it be like all of a sudden, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff out there that my parents protected me from. So you have to figure out where that line is. And we did some things in our family, like, I love the movie Mean Girls. I think it's a brilliant movie. It has an incredible message. And it's PG-13 for a reason. And it was a milestone in our family when the kid turned 13, we watched Mean Girls with that kid that turned 13. That was sort of a milestone thing. On the other hand, like when my daughter was in, I think, 8th grade and everyone was watching The Hangover, and her friend's favorite movie from school was The Hangover, we're like, that's going to be a no. We're not doing The Hangover. So there's certain things that we said yes to, and we'll watch them with you, and we'll sort of talk about them. We're going to say no to other things. Another plug for my favorite TV show, Friday Night Lights. That was a milestone where we would watch the movie or the whole series together with our kids when they were older, and we all had to be together to watch them. And then when the younger two kids got to, I think, age 14, 15, we would watch them all together. So having some fun with milestones and as they become appropriate for those kids. College is coming faster than you think, and if they go away to college, you want to start the process of letting them develop those wings gradually, not all at once. So the action item on this one is just to talk about where your line is with the family. What does this look like, and what do we think is appropriate for this kid, and for our where we want to draw that line. On a similar note, point 5, technology is here for better or worse, and you have to figure out your strategy. So I think a lot of you would know about the book Tech-Wise Family by Andy Crouch. It's fantastic to read and to help kind of determine what your strategy as a family is going to be on this. I would say that you want to avoid the extremes, but again, everybody's different. So I've heard some parents say, well, when they turn 18, if they want to get a smartphone, they can, but I'm not buying them one, and that's fine. That's one approach. I also think it's crazy to be handing a smartphone into the hands of a 10 or 11-year-old. There's just a lot of families are doing that. I think that's too early. I think I've heard, and I don't know lately, but the wait till 8 idea, which is 8th grade, which is that sort of cell phone in 8th grade makes sense. I know it's getting earlier and earlier, and I know that if you wait until 8th grade, for a lot of people, your 8th grader is going to be the very last 8th grader to have a phone. But I also know that there's things like phones like a watch or things where they can only text, and there's a lot of good technology that's coming out that's allowing that gradual thing to happen. And I would say that's the way to do it. To do it gradually, you're controlling passwords on, so a kid, even if they have a smartphone, they're not able to add their own apps themselves. You have to approve it, that kind of a thing. Again, figure out that line. Let it be a gradual thing, so that by the time, because again, if your kid's going off to college, you're not going to be there. You're not going to be there approving apps. You're not going to be there monitoring cell phone usage. So you can help them kind of gradually get into the world of technology, or not. You can sort of decide that's not what our family does. That's completely up to you. I will say that even the parents with best intentions, teenagers are crafty. I know about one of my students, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. She had 2 phones in her hand, and I was like, "Oh, why do you have 2 phones?" She's like, "Oh yeah, this is my parents' phone that they gave me, and this is the one that one of my friends gave me, so I can do it." And I'm just like, oh, those sweet parents, they're doing everything right, and that crafty teenager just like got around it, and has a way around it. So remember that they're crafty, because you were too. I mean, you were a crafty teenager as well. But the other thing to remember is that parents who are addicted to their phones tend to have kids who are addicted to their phones. So you can model that. We have we have the evening charging station. Parent phones go to bed in the kitchen, and I still to this day I put my phone there. My wife has her phone in the room so that if there's an emergency, there's a phone in the room late at night, but mine goes there. And knowing that, of course, when they go off to college, they're going to do whatever they want. But while they're there, phones don't go in rooms. And what's interesting is that my oldest just told me that after reading or listening to a podcast or something, she decided that at the age of 25, she is now not keeping her phone in her room. She's charging it in the kitchen. So sometimes they come back to these crazy rules that you have, when they were younger. They come back to them when they're a little bit older. Take advantage of things like, I think Andy Crouch talks about this, but other people talk about finding an hour a day where phones are off. Maybe that's meal times or maybe that's another time. Finding a day a week when you can also model, maybe not turning them off for a full day, but just saying, hey, we're not going to pay attention to our phones for this day, whatever that day might be. And then if you can find a week a year where we go to a camp where the cell phones don't work at the camps, which is amazing. But if you can find opportunities, maybe it's on vacation, and maybe you can even ask them to say, hey, what should we do about our cell phones on this vacation, you guys? And sometimes they'll even be up for things like, yeah, maybe we can take a break from them. But finding opportunities for them. And, when we take students on mission trips, one of the best things that happens on those mission trips is we take their phones away. And what happens after a week away from their phones is they go, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't have my phone. I didn't realize how into it I was. I don't even want to turn it back on. So when they get away from it, they realize kind of how much they were into it. Give them those opportunities when you can. So, and the action item here is just to talk about your strategy with your spouse and maybe even with your family. Check in and say, hey guys, how are we doing? Are we on our phones too much, or what can we do? How are we feeling about that? That's number 5. Number 6 is talking to your kids about sex should start young and continue age appropriately as they grow. The thing that again, bragging on my wife, I remember one time our oldest, who was always very curious, and at some point she asked where babies come from, and my wife just told her. She said she used the medical terms about what happens with a man and a woman, penis and a vagina. She didn't sort of water it down or any. I mean, she just kind of she gave a very plain answer to the question. If you can do that and continue to do that as your kids grow, they will know that you're a safe place to come to and that you'll tell them the answers to the questions that they have. The newest difference, of course, in the past 4 to 5 years is that by early middle school, you will want to talk about LGBT issues with your kids. Especially if they're in public schools, but it's happening everywhere. We cannot run away from it. Expect that you can somehow protect your kids from what's going on in that realm. But we have to, I think, appropriately address it. How you address it is important. And as you talk about it, the one thing to keep in mind is that it would be wise for you to use language that does not assume that your kids will never have same-sex attraction in their lives. So it's not just like, well, those people, because it's certainly possible that your own children will have those questions, those attractions in their lives. The best resource I can recommend for this is the Center for Christian Sexuality, which is run by Preston Sprinkle. He's got a podcast, he's got books, he's got videos that really addresses this head on and does a great job, I think, of handling it really, really well. The birds and the bees talk, most people don't do that anymore. I would say the more important talk really is the one where you sit down and maybe even a series of talks to talk about God's design for sexuality. It's not just where babies come from, but what did God design sex for, and how that biblical understanding differs from what the world might see as the understanding of God's design, or why sex exists. that sex doesn't just exist for pleasure and for whoever you're attracted to, you just sort of, you act out on that, but rather God's design is very specific and is really designed to be used in one context only. That can come up organically as you know, a TV show, and there's characters on there, and they're talking about it, and of course they're talking about it lots and lots everywhere. That might be an organic way to just have a conversation with your kids about, oh, what do you think about this? What does the scripture say about it? I would say the most important thing that you can do as you're having these conversations is to make sure that you are using language with empathy as it relates to especially LGBT issues. Before you jump, you know, because it's easier, especially for older people. Older adults, you need to remember your kids have grown up where gay marriage, for instance, has been legal for our children as long as they can remember. That has been the norm. Older adults are still getting used to that. They are not still getting used to that. That's just been the life that they have existed in. So eliminating snide remarks about things that you might see on TV shows, eliminating anti-gay jokes from your life, having understanding, having empathy as you talk about this issue is going to be really, really important. We were recommended, and we were able to follow through on this, having an 8th grade graduation trip with a kid of the same gender. So when our daughter, Kayla, turned in 8th grade year, she and my wife took a trip, just the two of them, and the point of the trip wasn't to talk about sex, but it was like on the trip, hey, we're going to have fun, we're going to celebrate that you're entering high school, and just so you know, any question that you have about anything, sex or life or death or, you know, the Bible, anything that you want to ask, anything you've been curious about, you can talk about it. And having that kind of a milestone trip can be really important, and those questions can come out during those times. The last point on this, as you talk about dating and marriage, do what you can not to insinuate that marriage is the point of life. We can say, well, when you get married and when you're married, and we can sometimes do that. I'm certainly have been guilty of that, but just to say Jesus is the treasure, that whether you get married or not, that's not the goal. So if you get married would be better language to use so that they understand, you know, your kids might not get married and they're going to have full lives as followers of Jesus. The action on this would just to be, maybe you need to schedule a time to talk to your kids about a biblical understanding of sex. All right, 3 more. Number 7 is that you need other adults in your kids' lives. Very influential book called Sticky Faith by Kara Powell, talking about the things that happen to help kids have faith when they're adults. One of the most interesting things that their research found is that kids who had more adults mentoring them or just being a presence in their lives, those kids did better than ones who had fewer. So they talk about the 5 to 1. We in youth ministry sometimes say, well, you need 1 adult for every 5 kids, like to go on a retreat or whatever it is. She says every kid needs 5 adults in their life that they can look to. It doesn't mean they have 5 mentors. It just means that every kid has 5 adults other than their parent that they can say, that's an adult who has an authentic faith in Jesus. So that means that one or two of those could be the high school youth group leaders. But maybe the other 2 or 3 are just your friends that are in your adult small group. That when your kid has a sporting event, they come and support them. When they're in the play, they come to that play. What that also means is that you, as the parent, can be that for another kid. And again, I'm not talking about taking them out for coffee and necessarily actively mentoring. They need some of that, but we all need to be positive influences so that our kids are seeing other examples other than you of parents who are following Jesus. The scripture here is just, without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. So your kids need more people that they can look to and say, these are all adults who are following Jesus. It's not just my weird parents who are like telling me stuff to do, but I see a cloud of witnesses there. This also is important because some parents can, when their kids get to youth group, they can feel threatened by their kids' youth group leader. And I promise you this will, well, it's happened to us. It will potentially happen to you as well. That your kid will come home and will say, well, yeah, my leader said that what I really need to do about this issue is whatever. And in your head, you'll think, you mean the very thing we told you to do? Are you kidding me? We said that. You don't say that. You say, oh, that sounds like really good advice, right? Because the bottom line is they're getting the good advice. They're getting good influences in their lives. And at some point, they do stop listening. What you say isn't as influential. It doesn't make the impact that it used to when they were younger. So you want those voices in your kids' lives, even though it may feel like, are you kidding me? What about, I said that. Let it go. Let it go. So the thing to the action would just be to take an inventory on the adults in your kids' lives. Do they have a bunch? Do they have plenty? Are there more that you can just sort of get them in the influential sphere of other adults in their lives? That's number 7. Number 8, the biggest obstacle to youth group involvement in high school is a lack of relationships. So I did high school ministry. I've 25 years, been doing it, and so I'm a big fan of high school youth group. But in a lot of churches, when the kids get into high school, their participation can drop. We see it in every church. And a lot of times it's because parents don't see the value in it. So just let me be a parent who says, hey, hopefully your youth group, the youth group that your church has is a healthy one, and you want them involved. But often the obstacle will be, you'll hear parents say, well, yeah, they're not going. Well, why? The more that you dig, there's probably either a broken relationship or no relationships to gather, to draw them to that youth group. Youth group is so much about relationships. I do a fine job of giving youth group talks, but there's not been a single student in the last 25 years whose primary reason to come on a Sunday night to youth group was because I just can't wait to hear another one of Syler's talks. That's the reason why I'm going. No. Now, did they come here and hear the gospel and hear the Bible preached? Yes, they did. But the thing that drew them there primarily, because they're so relational, is their relationships. They've got a relationship with a mentor, a small group leader. They've got a relationship with a friend. And that's the draw. So if they don't have relationships, if they just don't have friends at church, for instance, there's some kids that they don't have any friends at church. All their friends are at school. They're very likely not going, if they come at first, they're going to come maybe to make their parents happy, but eventually they're just going to stop coming because there is a lack of relationships, or there's a broken relationship. They don't like that other person there, and they don't want to see them, and so they stop coming. So the more if those of you that are in ministry, the more that you dig into it, it's probably a broken relationship or a lack of relationships. And parents, I would encourage you that if that's the case, if it's a broken relationship, do what you can to try to mend that. If it's a lack of relationships, you still have influence to try to figure out ways, especially if your kids are younger, to see that they have friends at church, because that's the most likely case of somebody succeeding, is if they have friends at church. And then the final one is, the action here would be to take an inventory of your kids' friends, their relational situation. Do your kids have enough friends at church? Are there broken relationships that need mending? All right, and the last one is this. It's important to figure out when and how to start letting go. Starting when your youngest goes to kindergarten, you're beginning the process of letting go. Right? When they get on that bus, when they go to kindergarten, that is the beginning of the end of, and it comes quickly. It comes on you quickly. The Bible warns parents, especially fathers, that they can embitter their kids if they're not careful. Colossians, fathers, do not embitter your children. They'll become discouraged. Other translations say provoke or aggravate. What that says to me is that you can do something that makes your kids angry, and it's not their fault. It's your fault. And the time when I felt like I messed this up is when I was too controlling, especially when my kids were at an older age. So the more controlling I am, and it can happen because you see them starting to go, and you see them starting to, they smack you in the face with their wings. Like they're trying to spread their wings, and you get smacked in the face with it. And it's frustrating, and it's hard because you're just like, but now I can't control them. I don't know what they're doing. You have to understand, you need to figure out when and how to start letting go. And, David, in the previous panel, he was quoting Paul Tripp as saying that the bar of soap, you've got to hang on to it, but if you squeeze it too hard, it squirts out. The analogy that I've used is the sport of curling. It's a big hit in Canada. This analogy goes over really big in Canada because they do a lot of curling there. But curling is that thing that you watch on the Winter Olympics every 4 years with the big stones, and it's got a handle on it, right? And then they go, I've tried it. It is so much harder than it looks. Oh my gosh, they're amazing. But so it's like shuffleboard, but it's this thing on the ice, and at some point you let go. You have to. If you hang on too long, past a certain line, you're disqualified. It doesn't count. So you have to let go. But what you have done prior to that line, the direction that you have pointed those rocks is the direction that they're going to continue to go. Your influence continues. You know what happens next? If you've watched it, they come out with their brooms and they sweep. They sweep the stone, and they're not able to influence it the same way as when they were holding on to it. But you still have influence. Your role has to change from having this direct control to still being able to influence as they get older. So everything that you have done prior to letting go, everything that you've done as they enter high school, and even in the earlier years, 14, 15, 16, and that driver's license is a big one because then they're off and you don't necessarily know exactly what they're doing anymore. But the way that you have guided them is important. It's important what you've done. And the way that you then let go is also very important. And I'll just end by going back to point one, that this is all God's. These are His people. He has a plan for their life that's different than yours. God is the answer. And when we put ourselves in a right relationship to Him, we trust our kids to God, that's when things work out the best.